Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do.
But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy.
They're just gonna remember some guys now.
And here we go, first snap of the overtime. The Broncos have been in 3 overtime games this year. They won them all. Got him at the 40. It's Thomas at the 50. Stiff arm got him free to the 30. To the 20. Thomas to the 10. Denver's going on to New England. They win it on the first play of Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players past and present. Hey there, folks. It's me, one of your hosts, James. I'm here with Tim Tebow taking one of the NFL-approved knees.
Well, look, I just got to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because that's the only way that duck of a ball found its way to Demaryius Thomas. It's actually Diaz back with you once again, but we have a very special guest with us. He is a man that knows a thing or two about 316. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, you know what? I actually worked with Tim Tebow's parents in the Philippines, circumcising people as part of my Christian mission. Don't ask my age. It is me, the very special guest, Xavier.
Well, Xavier, we're so glad that you could cut your time there short as we get your time here for the show for a little bit. You know, we don't want to hold you from very important work, so let's just get right to it. Is there anything that's making memories for you right now?
Well, hold on. Just before we move on, because that intro, James, there's just 2 things about that play that everybody forgets that are just, like, incredible.
It made my hand sad.
So 3 things, actually. Thank you for reminding me about the first one. The second thing is that gave Tim Tebow, religious zealot. I shouldn't say zealot. He seems like he's mostly a pretty cool guy. Exactly 316 passing yards. And also, that was the first overtime that was played under the rules of, if the Broncos only kick a field goal, the Steelers get a chance to respond.
Yeah, I remember very vividly them going through a primer on the new rules as we entered it. They're like, but what if that didn't matter? What if this was Tim Tebow's last moment as a quarterback at home in Denver, if I'm not mistaken?
And then they got stomped. I think it was like 59-14. But all that aside, those are distant memories. More recent ones, Xavier. I hear you might have some.
Yeah, this was a very long time coming, but MLB did just add Negro League stats to the official MLB statistics, which is great because it means known racist Ty Cobb no longer has the career batting average record because Josh Gibson has it with a 372 average, and Ty Cobb is screaming in hell right now for multiple reasons. But for a super racist to lose his record to someone who he would have campaigned to prevent from ever playing in the major leagues is fantastic. Just to clarify for people who don't understand, for these official stats, Major League Baseball is only using actual league stats. Because of the way the Negro Leagues were set up, there were a lot of barnstorming and farm teams because they needed money. They played a whole bunch of games that weren't actually, regular season games. So a lot of these seasons were only like 60 to 70 games long, even though they played 150 plus games during that. So for anyone who was confused about that, these stats do not include any of those barnstorming or farm team games. It is solely Negro League regular season statistics.
And to those of you who say, man, this sure is good PR for Major League Baseball, the organization that famously kept a lot of these individuals from ever being able to play at this higher level. Well, yeah, it sure is that.
Look, ending slavery was good PR for Abe Lincoln. It was still the right thing to do.
If everybody in power everywhere decided to do good things solely for PR purposes and to make themselves feel better, the world would be 900 times better of a place. I don't care if you're doing it for selfish reasons. Just do it.
I just want us to keep in mind that these gentlemen's lives were made actively harder by the organization that is now folding them into their record books. And
well, all those people are dead now, so it's fine.
Well, yeah, and maybe it kind of sucks that they didn't do this until all those guys were dead, Xavier.
No, I mean...
Willie Mays is out there.
No, I mean all of the Major League Baseball officials that blocked them are all dead now and rotting in hell. I did not mean the Negro Leagues players. I would not have said that so
they're
jovially.
also all largely dead.
Yes, but I would not have said that so jovially. That, they're all dead now. Like, I meant the racists. They're all dead. And the ones that are still alive that we don't know about, they'll be dead soon too.
Their time will come.
Right?
Hate shortens your lifespan.
And due to legal reasons, Xavier cannot comment any further, but just know their time is coming.
Well, I hope that no racists listen to us, so they won't hear me anyway. Other than that, not a whole lot going on. A lot of the basketball has kind of been boring, unfortunately. We did at least avoid a double sweep yesterday when the T-Wolves just barely held on.
Wolves alive.
They're alive. I don't think they're going to last that much longer. But at least it's better than the Pacers, who had 3 incredible chokes. ESPN had their winning percentage at over 90% in the last minute for 3 of the 4 games, and they lost all 3 of them, which is a really bad choke. I'm not going to give them the Halliburton was injured thing, because they very famously did not give a shit about the Knicks missing their entire starting lineup.
Yeah. All of the Knicks. The Knicks missing the Knicks.
But even with missing Halliburton for games 3 and 4, they were winning at the end and then still choked. I mean, game 4, they did not score a point in the last 3.5 minutes.
You can say it that way. The other way you can say it is they did not score a point after Jaylen Brown punched TJ McConnell in the face and didn't get a flagrant for it. What the actual fuck? Are we serious? What are we doing here?
Diaz, you're forgetting the rules. Everybody on Boston gets 1. Jason Tatum could have punched Miles Turner in the nuts and it would have been fine because they all get 1. We've discussed this. Boston is the love tribe of the team.
Year. It's an evil year.
And that's absolutely fine, but that might have been the worst foul I've seen in an NBA playoff game since Andrew Bynum threw an elbow at JJ Barea. And I'm not saying it was intentional. It, of course, was not intentional. But the end result was one of the worst fouls I've seen in a basketball game in at least 10, 15 years. And, if we want to say we're protecting player safety, that simply needs to be a flagrant. It just has to be. And, yes, Boston gets 1. Boston's probably going to get 16 in these playoffs. Let's be real. But, God damn it, make them earn it. We can't just be handing this shit.
Honestly, I kind of feel that if the Knicks were healthy, they could have beaten this Boston team. They got the sweep because the Pacers choked 3 out of 4 games. I feel like also the Celtics play down to their opponents, so I don't know. But I think if the Knicks had Julius and OG and Brunson, they would have given them the game. But the last thing I wanted to mention real quick is I am going on Friday to see the team that has the best record in baseball play, which is not my New York Yankees. It is the Philadelphia Phillies. Although technically they might not have the best record by the time I go see them.
We lost 3 out of 4 as we record, Xavier.
But I will be there on Friday to see that game, which is nice because I think officially now have been to more Phillies games in my life than I will have Yankees games, which is more a product of just where I live. But I won't be rooting for St. Louis, even though I love them. I will root for the Phillies while I'm there. But I will also be wearing my Murakami jersey because it is the closest thing to Phillies gear that I own.
You even get the sentence that you love St. Louis out without choking a tiny bit. How do you manage that, man?
Because of Albert Pujols. That is the only thing that I need to say. Albert Pujols is my favorite player of all time for any sport. It is that simple.
I'm trying to think. Japanese legacies for both teams. Because I think you had Sota Gucci. I think he played for the Cardinals, too. Phillies had Tadahito Iguchi. Phillies might have more Japanese players. And we haven't
I'm sorry, Diaz. When I think of the Phillies and Japanese baseball players, all I can think about is Hideki Matsui, World Series MVP. I'm sorry.
As you would. I'd expect nothing less.
What about the Phillies? Sounds like they might not be making memories for Diaz, but what is make memories for you?
Well, listen, the Phillies are great. Hideki Matsui hitting dingers in that World Series, not so great. But what was fantastic was the 2024 MAC with 2A's baseball tournament.
The MAC.
MAAC, the MAC, every sheep's favorite conference. And not because they're easily brainwashed, because it has 2A's just like they go bad. Let me tell you, you're not paying attention if you don't love MAC baseball. First of all, something I was just thinking about this conference that I love. We're in this world where there's so many generic nicknames. Let's just go through some of the best ones in the MAC. We have the Niagara Purple Eagles. We have the Fairfield Stags. We have the Siena Saints. Saints is in St. Bernard's.
Oof.
We have the Marist Red Foxes. There's the Canisius Golden Griffins. Of course, everybody knows I'm a Peacock. You gotta let me fly. The St. Peter's Peacocks. and all around incredible conference. But I want to focus on two games in particular from the MAC tournament. So first of all, the way that these tournaments work, it's a single site tournament. You're trying to play 3 games in one day. So generally, you're looking at 11-3-7 is kind of your ideal start times. You get extra innings, you get rain, blah, blah, blah. These things can get moved back a little bit. On day 2, rain pushed the start of the first game back to, I think, 1:45 is when we officially started it. This means that because of a lot of runs being scored and the fact that the latest, we were legally allowed to start the last game was 11 p.m. The last game's first pitch was at about 10:50. A couple fun things about this game between the Marist Red Foxes and the Ryder Bronx. Bronx as in Broncos, but no O, not as in the Bronx of New York. Can't afford that second syllable. First of all, the stadium. We played at Clover Stadium, which is in Pomona, New York. It's not named after my dog. It's named after some company called Clover. And the Boulders play there. Part of the Pioneer League, I think. It's one of the independent leagues. Beautiful ballpark. But one of the things about this ballpark is they're not expecting there to be baseball played at 11:30 p.m. So they have their sprinkler system set up to automatically go off at 11:30 p.m. every night. Thankfully, we were in the middle of a mound visit in the top of the 3rd inning when all the sprinklers just went off. It took about 5 minutes to figure out what was going on there. Umpires were trying to tamp them down. The sprinklers came back with a vengeance. It was a whole thing for a little bit, about a 5-minute delay. The clock went on to strike midnight. The clock went on to strike 1 a.m., 1:30, 1:45. It was finally 1:55 when the final out was recorded. And it was exactly 2 a.m. Eastern time when we faded to black on the final broadcast of day 2. That was amazing. Shout out Justin Kapazinski, first baseman for the Marist Red Foxes, had 2 moonshots in that game, like absolute moonshots.
And presumably the moon was there for comparison's sake.
It was a full moon too. Like I need to throw that out. Like it's like all of the vibes of this game were just fucking weird and delightful.
I mean, that's almost a home game for Marist. I mean, I know the MAC is my hometown conference, essentially. But, the New York Boulders are 30 minutes from my parents' house. So, that is the Hudson Valleyest conference there is, other than, I guess, now the American having Army literally on the Hudson.
Yeah,
good old MAC.
The American is America's conference because, literally look at the locations. It's basically all of America at this point. But we're not focusing on the American. We're focusing on the MAC. So first of all, Marist won that game. That was an amazing game. And one of the beautiful things about these tournaments, too, is by the time we got to Championship Sunday, didn't mean dick. Nobody cared. Championship Saturday, I should say. Marist was out. Ryder was out. It was Niagara and Fairfield. The clear 2 top teams in the conference all year long. Both went 20-4 in conference play. Fairfield had the 1 seed, but had lost earlier. Came close to actually being bounced, but had a couple comeback victories to get into the championship game. So Niagara is entering from the winner's bracket. They've only got to win once. Fairfield has to win twice. And from our perspective as the broadcasting team, if Niagara wins, we only have to do 1 game and we get to go home. If Fairfield wins, that means we have to do 2 games. So our rooting interests are obviously very clear. It was a delight for me when I was taking the elevator down to go to my car to drive in for the day. I shared the elevator with a couple of players on Niagara's team. And I just said, like, half jokingly, but like actually serious. I was like, guys, I think you can just take care of it in one. I think
More
we'd
time
all
to
like
celebrate.
that. Exactly. More time to
No
celebrate.
elevators to get stuck in.
No elevators to get stuck in, like Fairleigh Dickinson basketball. And, it's just take care of it in one. And there's one guy, big guy with a mustache, that said, hey, trust me, that's what we're trying to do. That big guy with a mustache, his name is Eric Radicek. Probably the best hitter in the whole conference all year long. He has an incredible story to get him to this point. He was playing club baseball at the University of San Diego this time a year ago. Not even NAIA, D2, D3, literally just like, hey, I'm going to sign up for this club at my school, except this club is a baseball team that plays other clubs around the area that also play baseball. He caught enough attention there, got an invite to a summer league, caught enough attention there, got an invite to a Niagara tryout, and they liked what they saw. They offered him a scholarship. Dude's been mashing all year long, and it was getting a little dark for us in the broadcast booth when we're in the top of the 8th inning, I want to say it was. Fairfield had just put up a 4 spot. Niagara was up 3-1. And they put up a 5 spot, so now it's 6-3, and we're like, all right, coming to terms with the fact that we're going to be here about 3-4 more hours than we were hoping to be there. Niagara strings together a couple hits. They get it tied 6-6, man on second. Eric Radicek works into a 3-2 count, and I have never seen a baseball leave a stadium quicker than this fucking piss missile to right field that he hit. I do not believe it had reached its apex by the time that it left the stadium. It got out so fast. He had one of the best bat flips you'll ever see in your life. His dugout is the first base dugout. As soon as he hit it, just turned back to the pitcher, looking at his dugout, flips the bat. They're all going apeshit. He rounds the bases. The fun thing from our camera shot, so when the ball's hit, you go to the high camera behind home plate. And it's zooming in on the ball as it goes to right field. And there's just one sad Fairfield fan sitting out there completely by herself. And the ball goes like flying over her head. And she doesn't even look up. Just sitting there, hands crossed, shakes her head a little bit. Niagara would go on to put up, I think, 2 more runs. And they would go on to win it. It is their first MAC conference championship. It is their first ever trip to the NCAA regionals in the history of their baseball program. And it's led by this guy, Eric Radicek, who did share an elevator with me, did get some words of wisdom from me. Hey, what if you won in 1 game? He probably didn't consider that until I said it.
He's not saying that Diaz is the reason for their win, but he's also not saying that.
I'm not saying anything.
Many people are not saying that.
Many people are not saying it. But, no, in all seriousness, for them to get their first trip in this fashion and for it to be on the back of a guy who, this time a year ago, kind of just playing baseball for fun, but he catches enough eyeballs, he gets a college scholarship out of it, and now they're going to NCAA regionals. In all likelihood, the way that these things go, so many of these Southern schools are just absolutely stacked. They're probably going to get put in a region with somebody who's like 50-4 all year, and they're probably going to get run ruled in every game that they play in NCAA regionals. I'm just being realistic and setting expectations. But 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're not going to remember that, but they're going to remember Eric Radicek hitting the biggest home run in the history of their program to launch them into the NCAA regionals. And Frank, I mean, it's a week I'm going to remember working forever. It's long hours, obviously, but at the end of the day, I get to sit on my ass and watch 3 baseball games. What more do we want than that? It was a beautiful time, beautiful experience working with everybody. Canner was on graphics for literally every single game. Every other position rotated. That maniac said, I'm doing all 3 every single day. I don't know how he did it, but what a beautiful tournament it was, and who knows? Niagara Purple Eagles. This podcast is very famous at jinxing. I just said they're going to get waxed. What if it becomes the Cinderella run to captivate the nation?
This is the one
I just looked. They are in the Stillwater Regional. They're going up against Oklahoma State with Florida and Nebraska as the other 2 teams in their regional. if they
Not
were
a great draw.
to advance, they are in the Clemson Super Regional with Clemson, High Point, Coastal Carolina, and Vanderbilt. So a lot of the South. They are easily the most northern team of that group of 8.
I think they're the only one that would have fought in the Union.
They absolutely would have. And I was hoping...
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Nebraska. I guess Nebraska's technically north. Nebraska's not
Sure.
Confederate.
Sure.
They just didn't exist yet.
Kind of the Switzerland of the Civil War.
I've always heard Nebraska referred to that way.
But, 27 outs, 9 innings, unless there's a run rule, which there probably will be. But this is why they play the games.
It sounds like a great way to spend your Memorial Day weekend watching all those games. I didn't get to watch that much sports over Memorial Day weekend. That is, one of the curses of working a weekend job. But I did catch a tournament. I got home in time Sunday to catch the end of Game 4 of the PWHL Finals. And my goodness, what an ending to that game. We'll set the scene real quick. The PWHL Finals is their first year having finals for the Walter Cup, named after some of the big funders behind it. So it's number 3 seed Boston and number 4 seed Minnesota that have made it there. Your beloved Minnesota PWHLers, Diaz. They have both overcome their higher seeded Canadian opponents to get here. Boston does win the first game, but Minnesota had taken the next 2. Minnesota still to this point undefeated at home in these playoffs through 2 rounds. It's a best of 5 series, meaning they are now set up for a Game 4 in Minnesota, where they have not lost yet, with a chance to win the first ever PWHL Finals. Players of the game throughout regulation, very easy top 2. Boston's Aaron Frankel and Minnie's Nicole Hensley, and that's because they are the goalies, and it is a 0-0 tie through 60 minutes. They have pitched a combined shutout with 39 saves entering overtime. And that's when I entered. This is when I'm picking up to watch it on YouTube. Stream it for free on YouTube. I watched 12 more saves pile up between the two over the next 20 minutes as we remained scoreless heading into a second overtime. In this thing that I was like, oh, cool, it's heading to overtime. I'll watch, 5 minutes of this at the end. No, I'm now fully invested with at least a period and continue.
James, you have to be aware of this as a possibility. I have watched 3 consecutive overtime hockey games in a row. If they don't end within 5 minutes, you're going to be sat there for an hour and a half.
Well, Xavier, again, not quite as familiar with playoff hockey in recent years. So I was a little bit more surprised than you might have been, but we get to second overtime. Minnesota, 91 minutes into the game at this point, but 11 minutes into this second overtime, gets a break down the ice. Forward Taylor Heiss cuts in front of Frankel's crease, Minnesota, gets a pass off, and Sophie Jacques slots it in for the game and title-winning goal. The crowd erupts.
Diaz goes wild.
Diaz goes fucking insane. The team crashes onto the ice, all celebrating. But Boston is also on the ice, and they're conferring with officials. And the play goes under review because Heiss had been sprawling, admittedly, when she passed it to Jacques. And there is a lot of contact between her and Frankel. This is devastating, I have to admit. Even as someone that was pulling for Minnesota, I'm not going to pretend I'm a neutral fan in this. Fuck Boston. This was correctly called interference with the goalie. And the game must resume. And Frankel and Hensley remain perfect through 65 combined shots. It is a minute 24 remaining before the third overtime period. I think I'm about to take my second intermission just since coming in after regulation. And this is when Alina Mueller finally gets one through. And I know neither of you have any idea which team she plays for, so I'm going to maintain the dramatic tension for just one more moment until I reveal that Boston did win a 1-0 game, forcing a Game 5. Thanks, Mueller. This Game 5 happens the night that we're recording this. Game has ended. I'm going to say, just in the nearly 40 minutes I watched, Minnesota looked far the better team at this point. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll win, but they looked a lot better than Boston in Game 4. So here's them in Game 5. But, so Alina Mueller, she, after scoring, hams it up for a little bit. There's a quick celebration with her team. And then the rest of Boston runs the fuck down that tunnel. They are booking it out of there. They are not spending any extra time around this crowd. Alina Mueller, I gotta give her some credit. She skated some tiny little laps in her own zone. She was kind of eating it up. She owned the villain persona very well, as a Boston player should. So I think we're all rooting for Minnesota, but fuck it, what an unexpectedly great 40 minutes of hockey I tuned in for.
I'm very disappointed in you that you thought I didn't know who won that game.
But did you know who Alina Mueller played for?
Well, I know who won the game, yes.
That's but if I just said Alina Mueller and I asked you which team she played for, you wouldn't have the statement that I made.
Well, because of the context, I knew immediately afterwards.
You can deduct it. I'm just saying, Mr. Lawyer Man, that I did not slander you this time. I made a true statement, but you weren't able to deduce it. Because you're very smart, Xavier. Anyway, that's what's making memories for me right now. But if we can take it back for a moment, that intro. Part of the reason we brought that is because, much like Mr. Tebow, we have a bit of an intersection between the sports and religion world this week as we welcome not our very special guest, but a new guest to the show. And we're going to go ahead and throw to that segment right now. Ladies and gentlemen and everyone else, the intersection of sports and religion, as we've mentioned, there's a wide Venn diagram of that. But we are very proud to have a guest from that intersection today. One of the hosts of the Shutdown Fullcast, a member of the athletics editorial staff, and the hat that brings us here today, author of Hell is a World Without You, Jason Kirk. Welcome to the show.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me. It's a very slow news day, so just figured I'd stop by.
Absolutely.
Chat about sports.
Nothing important has happened in the last minute or so. No, we are here to chat about sports and to chat about your book before we start anything else. That is the avenue through which you and I first connected and this came about, because Hell is a World Without You is great. I want to start by saying that it is a Bildungsroman. Is that too pretentious to describe it?
That's a term a lot of people have used. It was honestly, despite having an English degree, it was a term I learned from the process of writing this. It was, after I sent around the first draft in maybe late 2020 or early 2021, and one of the people I sent it to was an English professor, and he used that word, and I was like, oh, yeah, definitely, that's what I wrote, yeah, so.
I remain amazed to this day how much I use the stuff that I learned in my children's literature and folklore class from college. It is remained indispensable to me, and I say that without the slightest irony. But yes, this Bildungsroman, this coming-of-age tale of Isaac, a boy growing up in a very evangelical community, tracing his high school, his high school life as he becomes disillusioned with teachings of the church at a turbulent time there at the turn of the millennium. It's really wonderful. I am myself not necessarily an evangelical or an ex-evangelical, but I did have a pretty Christian Episcopalian upbringing, and it was a really phenomenal book to read. A question that occurred to me while I was reading it: most of the stuff, Jason, that I know you from between the full cast, between your work on like newsletters at The Athletic, you do a lot of very collaborative work. And I know you got a lot of like bylines and stuff from SB Nation, but in everything I've heard you talk about regarding this book, it has been kind of a singular thing in terms of the amount of ownership that you've had over it. The fact that this is something you yourself kind of put together, being able to kind of see it exist in the world for a little bit. How different now, like how much does that, I'm curious, color your perception of that within like the overall body of work that you've made to this point?
Yeah, that's a fun question. Yeah, like you say, so much of my work has been editing teams of writers, or co-hosting a podcast with a big, several other people. And so to do a project like this that is so personal, that started, the seeds of it in 2020 started when just finally started unearthing religion stuff for the first time and realizing what had been, what I just sort of ignored in my head my entire adult life. And it's you can see the direct line when I truly got started going on the project was, it was when I lost my job because sports shut down, right? Because, 2020 quarantine, there was no need for sports media for a few months there. And the
other half of your life came up.
Yeah. And so it was just sort of this moment of, I'm sitting on my back porch right now, and there were just so many afternoons, I remember in 2020, of just sitting here by myself, with my nothing but my brain for the first time in my entire life, because like, you know, I have had workaholic tendencies at times, and like when I was in college, I had like 2 or 3 jobs, and like, you know, as a kid, I went to school and I also went to church, and church was often
a job.
Yeah, it was often
You have a
more time than.
Yeah, there's a very detailed breakdown in the book of the full-time work that you had to put into being like a Christian youth kid.
Yeah. For anyone who hears that and thinks like, oh, I went to church too, it took 45 minutes. I'm like, no, no. We're talking many days a week, the commitment at the time. So like, for me, you know, that year of true solitude for the first time in my life, it was a dramatic shift, you know, from doing everything collaboratively. And then, you know, there were just so many long days of, you know, 2021, 2022, literally doing 12 to 18 hours a day, just staring at the same Google Doc. Just me, you know, nowhere to hide, nothing to hide behind, right? But the fun part is there were still lots of ways to lean on other people and to ask other people what they thought. Like I was able to send it around to a couple dozen early readers along the way, and got great feedback from them. You know, my editor is a UNC Tar Heels fan, turns out. But
can't be helped.
Yeah, I mean nobody's perfect, but yeah, it was, you know, 99% solitude is what you sign up for when you start a novel, especially one that is like so deeply personal. But you do find so many of these moments of making connections during the process of writing. Like, you know, I met a couple people that I because of writing it, that I consider like very close friends now. And then once it's out there, then people respond to it. Then, you know, you're making, then it's like this secret thing that you made in this lab, and now the world can see it, and you can't really control what anyone thinks of it anymore. But hopefully you're able to make positive connections from that point onward. So in a way, it's kind of a lot of solitude invested in creating something, invested in, for me, it was deeply therapeutic, and, you know, solitude invested in more connections later on, I guess.
Sort of a seed and fertilizer for community later on, in a very like introspective way initially.
Yeah. Which, you know, it's not really a thing you like think about and plan out ahead of time. You know, it's a thing where, you know, like deep into the project, you start to think like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if, you know, but it's not what you set out to do. But yeah, it's fun. Like we've done a few book events in person, and there was one where someone came up to me and said, so do people just like dump their religious trauma on you now? And I was like, yep, let's go. Let's hear it. And they were like,
yeah, and
okay.
I'm ready for yours.
Yeah, you're next up. And there's a thing that it's been fun, you know, so the book's been out for about 6 months. And the first thing everyone says to me is, you know, after usually they say, I liked it a lot. No one has walked up to me and said, I hated it. But, you know, I assume if they did
there's
that,
a first for everything.
I assume if that happened, the second sentence would still be the same. I was raised blank. That is the first thing everyone tells me. I was raised just like you. I was raised atheist. I'm Jewish. I was raised in Massachusetts as a totally different denomination, whatever it is. Like something about this project makes people walk up to me and tell me that they were this or that or the other, which is great. It's interesting. It's
interesting that they go to like what they grew up in rather than a present state. Like it's about the conditions that fostered who they are rather than who they are right now.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, no one has walked up to me and said, I am currently agnostic, you know, or I am currently this. It is always about where did we come from, right? And that one I was thinking of, she said, so I was raised Church of Christ. And there's some that are made me go like, okay, all right, we're going to take some time here. It is very much a thing that, and there's a bit of it in the book where Isaac's mother, she sort of has a moment where she realizes, like, you know, adults like really don't get to think about where we came from. We don't get to look back at our younger selves. We don't get to look at current young people and think, oh, that person reminds me of me. We're just supposed to just shove it all in a drawer and never think about it again, and then have kids and just give them life lessons and stuff, but not actually relate to them, you know, not think of them as future us's, you know. Yeah, they're not really people. They're just things to like impart advice upon, you know. But like I don't know, the process of writing this and of writing, I guess, my characters, it's sort of a range of childhoods that are all of them in one way or another similar to mine and similar to lots of other people who grew up like me. And mining that, it showed me that, you know, my entire adult life, I had never like found peace with who I was. I had blamed myself for who I was, you know, for the world I was born into. And I had resented all of it as if I chose it. And that process of going back and finding that kid and saying, hey, buddy, you did the best you could. And thank you for getting us out of there. Right. And like, I have had that feeling over and over and over for the past few years of like, my God, this kid did the best he could. And now it's on me to make sure that me and this kid, who used to be me, can sort of pass this along to somebody else as well. And, you know, it's great. Like, I've heard people say, like, you know, people have told me they have been able to forgive their younger selves because they are not that person anymore. They are not that person who was raised in a world of, you know, bigotry, raised to, you know, assume that, like, you have to believe a certain way and, you know, all the stuff. And we can't do that unless we go back. Like, you can't just, that's the main thing I've learned from this whole project is you got to remember some guys, especially if those guys were you.
Absolutely. No, we're a very, in general, like backward looking project. We support that in general. So talking about kind of like varied childhoods, again, there's a lot of that like I could relate to, at least the primary one that you showed there, Isaac. But one thing about the religious community in particular that stuck out is like, I remember, you know, I was at church almost every Sunday, and during the sermon, the priest would acknowledge like, hey, also we're all going to get out of here in time for the Ravens game, like go Birds. And we'd go to the game, and like the person that sung the anthem every game at the Ravens for like the first 15 years was another priest from somewhere else in the city. So like religion and sports were totally comfortable kind of coexisting in my upbringing, even as I was at a lot of youth group and stuff and feeling guilt about other aspects of Americana for sure. In the book, the only like example I could immediately think of today going back over it was the emergency service that has to be held after the primary preacher's Super Bowl party gets ruined by Janet Jackson's nipple. And it was just interesting to see you as someone that, like, again, I know from a sports background primarily, depict a childhood that didn't have that much. And I was curious how like true to form that was.
So growing up in SEC country as a Southern Baptist, it was so conflated and overlapping and one and the same. You know, like the first example that comes to mind is every year the Chick-fil-A game. First of all, there's a Chick-fil-A game.
Yeah.
And it's like someone is doing a deeply Christian invocation, you know, before the game.
Very important that it remains in college football so it can be Saturday.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we had athletes coming through church to speak to us all the time, to give their testimonies, their tales of how Jesus saved them from pornography or whatever. We were taught to look up to very specific kinds of athletes, a few of whom I believe we'll talk about later on. But yeah, sports and religion were completely entrenched and enmeshed for me. Like it was yet another way in which this specific religious filter is meant to be applied to like literally everything in all of culture. Like there are some religious traditions that say you should completely withdraw from culture. There are some that say it's okay if normal people do this and we in church do that, and it's okay if you do a little bit of both. And then there are some, like the one I was raised from, which is okay, everyone is doing that. Well, we need to turn that into Christian stuff, right?
Yeah, we need to take that.
Yeah, we need to colonize that culture. And that was sports for us, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Whether you're an athlete or not, you did that before school. Campus Crusade has like a big, it's a college ministry that has a big sports component. Promise Keepers went to Promise Keepers in the 90s, founded by Colorado Buffalo's football coach, and they met in football stadiums. The entire thing was extremely football coded. I mean, honestly, I could probably talk about that for about 10 hours. The thing about the book is I intentionally went very light on sports in the book. Like, there's a bit of stuff, and it often it's sort of like background chatter. Like, there's a game on, and they make a joke about
Madden constantly.
Yeah. Like, and there's like some half-hearted, like high school, like, maybe I'll go out for the team. You know, like there's sports, but it's very background. And that was really intentional. I toned down the sports quite a bit because didn't want to be pigeonholed as a sports writer. Like I wanted the world to stand up on its own, and I knew every single sports thing in there would be viewed through the filter of sports journalist wrote this, So like there were a few where it's like, okay, intentionally, like there is a intentional Shutdown Fullcast reference on page 289, 294, somewhere in there. In the second to last chapter, there's a 2-word Shutdown Fullcast reference. And then there's like, okay, there's a scene of them watching sports. What sports is going to be? Okay, fine, it's college football, right? So it's like throwing a couple bones to like, all right, a lot of the people who buy this are going to be college football fans, and I acknowledge that. But I want to show that I guess I just wanted to spread my wings a little bit and show that like, all right, we're going to talk about music a whole lot more than we talk about sports.
Yeah, you do.
So yeah, I mean, you were completely right. There's not a lot of sports in there, and there could have been a shitload more.
Well, plus, as I understand, you're a Falcons fan, and like discussing that might make the whole belief in God thing shaky.
Yeah, I intentionally said it in Pennsylvania, and I had like all sorts of reasons.
That?
Well, I had all sorts of reasons for that, which was like I don't want it pigeonholed as like, oh, just Southern Baptist. No one else has weird religious stuff going on. But that did mean I didn't have to write about the Falcons at all in the entire book. And who wouldn't want a 4-year reprieve of thinking about the Falcons?
Well, in addition to sports, something similar about like the ethos of this show that you do touch on in terms of like competition is you talk about like some of the competitive Bible trivia that you all participated in. And this is another thing I have to admit, Episcopalians have not caught up to this one. This was relatively new. I guess I'm curious, like, are there sort of trading cards in that too? Do you compare stats? Like, are there all-time leaderboards for conversions? And like, genuine question. I don't know if there's like a stat head online that I can check for biblical statistics.
So, I mean, the 700 Club for a long time had like total souls touched or whatever as a metric that they would like roll on the bottom of the screen, like their fucking McDonald's sign selling, like billions and billions souls.
Yes.
700 Club kept track of the number of people they evangelized, and I mean, I'd say they ran up quite a score. Like it's always been a thing. It's like when you decide your religion is about converting people, and that's the most important thing. Like whatever you decide your group is about, people will get competitive about that thing, right? Like if your group is about being chill and normal, then people in the group will compete to be the chillest and the normalist, right? Thereby defeating the whole purpose. It's just, that is how things work. And when huge portions of Christianity decided that like, no, the single most important verse is the one about converting people, not the one about loving your neighbor, which is the one Jesus said is the actual most important thing. I mean, then you see like Catholics taking over all of South America, like then you see evangelicals doing all the weird stuff that we grew up doing. So like, yeah, keeping track of stats. It was a thing where it'd be like, oh yeah, you won this thing, so you get a sticker or a badge. Like we had our own like knockoff Boy Scout type stuff, like, and it would be like a mix of like, oh, you built the sick campfire, so you get the campfire badge, and also you were the quickest to recite the order of the books of the Bible, so you get a badge for that, like that type of stuff.
But it wasn't like in the Simpsons B Sharps episode, they get like the Methuselah rookie card. It isn't that.
I mean, we had cards. Yeah, we had. I mean, like literally anything you can think of, there is an evangelical version of it, and it's really, I mean, in a way, like Catholics have like icons of saints and stuff. Like everybody likes to collect pictures.
We have the new millennial saint now. That's gonna come out.
I saw that.
That's the big thing for us Catholics. Yes, it is the big thing this week. Carlo Acutis, who died at 15 as a social media influencer. And the social media influencer of God is his new title. He's going to be a saint.
So this is the smokescreen about the Pope saying not only a homosexual slur, but a homosexual slur that's apparently only said by other homosexuals in Italy. Right.
Yeah. Pope trying to win back Gen Z, basically.
I mean, hey, best of luck to him on that, I guess.
Saint of the internet, yeah. But like, I mean, I'm thinking back on like Bible-themed role-playing games and video games and comic books and you name it, there is collectibles of all that stuff. But in terms of like statistics, those would probably mostly only be kept at like the youth group level, right? Like I'm the champ of the youth group, and then the youth pastor leaves because of some scandal, and there's a new one, and he's got a whole new thing he wants you to compete at. He doesn't keep the old guy's records. Then he's gone because of some scandal in 3 years, and we got to start all over again anyway. You know,
you can start tracking how long they last between scandals.
Yeah, like who's the quickest youth pastor just to get up out of here? that gets the plaque on the wall. But yeah, you'd compete at the most like, I guess, widespread one is called sword drills, where someone calls out a verse and whoever finds it first is the winner of that round. And then, you could do that forever. There's 90,000 verses, but like, it's not fun, but it's a thing we had to do.
What do you win?
Trivia. You win a little bit of holiness. You win. I'll tell you exactly what you win. You win
Brownie
a
points are
slight
real in God's
reprieve
eyes.
from whatever guilt you were feeling 3 minutes earlier about whatever you'd been doing an hour before, right?
The girl that you
win.
just looked at accidentally.
Yes. You win one free dirty thought. Yeah.
It's a solid exchange rate. Perfect segue, though, on that topic of the kind of church shadow world. Is real quick exercise we want to do, a little bit lightning round before we get into your guys, just to kind of set the stage for the context of Guidem that you're coming from. Something that you have done a few times on the Shutdown Fullcast is you've provided the Bible analogs for different pop culture facilities, ranging from college football programs to Warhammer factions and everything in between there. And so we wanted to bring you just a handful of what we thought were some good guy archetypes to see, much as you once quickly had to find these verses, if you can think of any biblical lore figures that kind of fit those. And I'll go ahead and rattle off the first one. I wanted to see if you had a guy in mind that is known for particularly notable playoff failure. I think that's an archetype that we come across a lot here. Your Bill Buckner types, your Dr. Kevin Dyson types, somehow coming up short in the playoffs, and that being your primary thing to be known for. Anyone come to mind there?
There's a lot of examples here. There's, it's kind of the theme of the Kingdom of Israel all throughout, is there's constantly
coming
being
up short in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, like it's the theme of the prophets all throughout the Hebrew Bible. Is like, y'all, seriously, we finally, when we started to make some progress, y'all went and worshipped the poles on the mountains and whatever. How about Aaron? He's put in charge of Israel at Mount Sinai, the holiest moment in the history of the universe, according to the story. He's finally getting to play the big brother while his big brother is up there staring at God's face. And what does he do? He invents a new religion or something. And
this is Golden Calf, right?
Yes, Golden Calf. Yeah. And then and then he gets a second chance. God says, like, okay, well, you still have the same job, so just try not to mess it up next time. And then God's like, all right, so now we're on the move. We're through the desert. We're still going to do the same ceremony stuff. We're still going to do the same communal gathering type stuff. We need, the priests need to prepare the meat a certain way, and it needs to be a big celebration. You got to be very, very careful about this because it's very holy, very powerful. You got to follow the rules exactly. All right. And then what should happen? But Aaron puts his sons in charge of it, and they get blown up.
Delegation never really goes all that well.
It's a recurring theme with Aaron. Is as soon as he gets to postseason, something blows up.
Xavier, you got one?
Yeah. Rather than blowing up in that tense, I was thinking about maybe a guy who his career was a little nondescript, didn't get much credit, but much later on, people look back on him fondly like, oh, actually, that guy was great. We did not treat him as well as we probably should have in the moment.
So, like, the first place my mind goes is people who they didn't get their sort of recognition within the story itself, but over time, once you look back on the story in a new light, like, Delilah. Delilah killed Samson. Samson was God's big superhero guy, right? Oh, she must have been terrible. She must have been bad. No, Samson was a terrorist. And she outsmarted him. And she killed him. Samson was horrible. Samson was a bad person. She killed him. That was great. It was good that she did that. Rahab,
Delilah and Judith. equally good people. Like Holofernes and Samson, both equally terrifying.
The book of Judges over and over and over again shows women outsmarting evil men. From Deborah to this lady who drops a rock off the top of a tower and kills another terrorist. And like Delilah she is in the context of all those women. Like the Bible is pointing at her and saying like, no, it is good to kill horrible people. Jael who impales a bad general near the beginning of the book of Judges. So the women in the book of Judges who kill guys, those are the guys who we look back on and we say, oh no, they were actually good.
I have one that Diaz had sent us earlier. That's the idea of like a guy that doesn't really live up to the family name. A guy who's coming from some kind of lineage of like strong performers, maybe one of like Rick Barry's kids who never quite hits that high. Or like Yogi Berra had a son who got busted for dealing cocaine with the Pittsburgh Pirates mascot. So someone who's just like not living up to the family standard in the league.
Yeah, the book of Genesis is a parade of fail sons. I mean, you start with Cain inventing murder.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad one.
and then you go to Ishmael. It's not his fault; he's kicked out. Isaac, it doesn't have a ton of personality. He's kind of a lightweight, kind of a nobody. Joseph, almost all of his brothers are terrible. They literally sell him into enslavement. Then Joseph, once he gets a position of power, he becomes an enslaver as well. I consider that a failure. Yeah, the book of Genesis is just loaded with dudes not living up to their fathers. Jacob and Esau, I think they're the exception. I think they both exceed their parents in their own ways. Esau goes off and lives with wild women in the mountains, and they seem really happy about that, and good for them. And Jacob is like this, just the best dramatic figure of the book of Genesis. So when there's only a couple who aren't fail sons, then
it's a broad category to choose.
Yeah, you have a lot to choose from there.
X, do you have another one?
I do. I feel like this could be a lot of people just based on my limited knowledge of saints from my Catholic time. Someone who fits the type of the candle that burns brightest burns half as long. Someone who showed up, made a big impact, and then was gone very quickly. Which I realize, again, could be a lot of people.
Are we talking like a Jeremy Lin? Like halfway through the career, does it have to be a like rookie explosion onto the scene?
It could be anything. It could be a Grant Hill showing up and being like, oh, wait, this is the greatest basketball player of all time. And then 5 years later, we could have seen the greatest basketball player of all time, but his body would not let him do that.
So usually when you're a kid wanting to be a pro athlete, you think like, oh man, I'm going to play till I'm like 40. Right? Like that's a good long career, right? You think I'm going to play like 10, 15, 20 years, Mm-hmm. And then you see that stat about like the average career of even a successful NFL player is just 3 years, right?
Yeah, like so few of them make it to a second contract.
Yeah. But like, what if you were the greatest player in the NFL for just those 3 years? Like, what if you were like peak Lawrence Taylor for 3 years and that was the end of your career, right? Or peak Reggie White or Barry Sanders or, just pick whoever. Well, Jesus' ministry started at age 30 and he retired at age 33.
Yeah,
he was a late bloomer getting into the league. But
he put up fucking numbers.
He rang up some numbers.
Groundbreaking, very literally, with the harrowing of hell. Goodness gracious. That's a good one. One more, if we can bring it all home before getting to our main course today. The kind of guy who, a couple decades down the line, on a random day, someone would just tweet out, people forget, but X was a problem back in the day.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of like just hell-raising generals throughout the Hebrew Bible of various nations. Sometimes Israel, sometimes Assyria, sometimes Babylon, whoever. My favorite is in the book of Samuel. It's after David becomes king, and like David is now. There's a guy coasting off of his rookie year. You want to talk about David? Like kills Goliath, and then he just sucks for the entire rest of his life. He's horrible, and he's not even competent or good. Like the story of Bathsheba. How does it start? It starts with a verse that's
just
like
voyeuristic fucking murderer.
Yeah, why is he voyeuristic? Why is it? What should he be doing instead of being a voyeur? The Bible tells us in spring, when kings go off to war, David was sitting around jerking off. Like I am The only part of that verse I made up is the last two words. The Bible tells us David is a lazy loser. He has this general that he uses as a fixer. This general is the guy who gets Bathsheba's husband killed, gets a bunch of David's other rivals killed, and the whole time David is just doing this thing of like, oh my God, why did you do that? I can't believe you killed all those people I hated. So I think literally that general was a problem, and he is
And
often
people
forgotten
forget,
about.
yeah. So that is sort of a glimpse into the shadow biblical world of guys. But we have some other guys to discuss, and they are a lot less shadowy, a lot more. Well, actually, maybe I shouldn't say a lot less shadowy.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know about that, but definitely more literal and more physical, and they are more real. So I want to hear about the guys that we have today from you, and we will then judge them accordingly. But let's go ahead and hear what we got.
So the first one that came to mind when we started discussing the like religious crossover evangelical athlete kind of thing is AC Green, who 80s forward for the Lakers, decent player, had a nice long career that really lasted a long time, really a lot of patience and endurance and a lot of waiting around and just always there, unchanging, unspoiled, untouched, unvarnished. Because AC Green, thing that we were taught to emulate about him is he was a virgin, and as an NBA basketball player, as a veteran NBA basketball player, Tim Tebow didn't invent that gimmick. It was AC Green who we were taught to emulate, and it was this thing where it's like, when you grow up as this, like everyone loves the NBA, right? Like we all grew up basketball fans. We love the NBA, and that's the guy we were pushed toward. And it's nothing against him personally. Like, maybe he's a really great dude, and it's nothing against making the choice to, making the choice to be celibate. Like, great, whatever. It's when you're, 14 and you're told that like you might need to wait decades, like, because if AC Green can do it, you can do it too.
If AC Green can go an entire professional career without getting laid, so can you.
Like AC Green is rich and athletic and handsome and travels the country and could get away with anything he wants, but he doesn't. And we're like, and
he's the greatest player in the world, and if I'm seeing this correctly, his highest ever points per game for a season was 14.7.
He's a decent player, but we were taught to think of him as if he was the Michael Jordan of not having sex, which he was, to be clear.
Well, like, he coincides with the Magic Johnson Lakers, if I'm not mistaken, with those late 80s ones. Magic Johnson,
he was the no-show time. Yeah.
Did some fucking.
They needed AC Green to balance out the showtime. If they just had everybody party, they never would have been that successful. They needed AC Green in his suit and tie, being like, no, we have to go back home and get a good night's rest before the game tomorrow.
Yeah. And like, do you know how like you're gifted like an NBA jersey and it's an AC Green jersey, and your grandma is like, well, aren't you going to wear it to school? Aren't you? Do you want me to be sad about me thinking you don't like the present I gave you? And it's like, well, why wouldn't you want to wear it to school? Why wouldn't you want to wear the AC Green jersey to school? Is there something you're trying to tell us about what you're doing in secret? And it's like,
support of him is a moral choice.
Yeah, it's a moral choice that everyone is immediately going to make fun of you for. I didn't have an AC Green jersey, but there has got to be some Christian kid out there who was taught that like you must stand with this guy who the only thing anyone knows about him is his commitment to virginity. Like you're gonna go to public school wearing a shirt that says virgin. That's the level of
it is. It's a giant. It's the scarlet letter for virgin.
And like for anyone younger listening to that, it's like it's not like today. Like today, it is people are more accepting about like if you decide you find someone you want to do that with and they want to do it with you and it's later in life, great, cool, whatever, wonderful. In the 80s and 90s, I speak for the 90s, it was not like that. It was, you're 15 and you haven't had sex yet. That it was just like, it's open season on you. Or you don't have any convincing lies you could tell about.
You can't make up sex by this point?
Yeah, you can't plausibly convince anyone of your lies about having had sex. So like it was this contrast of at church, it's you're supposed to convince everyone that you've never gone beyond a handshake, and at school you're supposed to be very, very mystical and vague about exactly how far you've gone, so that everyone thinks you're still the good church kid, but they think you might have a little edge to you, you know. And AC Green really complicates all that, because if someone's like, "Hey, we should make fun of that guy," and you have second thoughts about that, bam, they got you.
Well, and not only does he remain clean and pure from sex, but as I'm looking at this Wikipedia page here, won 3 championships, apparently avoided the champagne spray during all 3 of those in order to maintain sobriety in addition to abstinence.
Like a vampire or something.
Yeah, or the Wicked Witch of the West. He would melt on.
Yeah. And you know, if someone doesn't want alcohol, cool, great, that's cool.
Exactly,
cool,
yeah.
Whatever, wonderful. It's just, don't make me, a 17-year-old, look like a nerd because
don't make me commit to not drinking or having sex via a basketball jersey.
Yeah. Like, yeah, that's the thing, is like when you wear an athlete jersey as a young person, you want to be able to express something about yourself. Like ideally, it's a way that you can say, like, no, I'm cooler than you think I am, right? Whereas if you were wearing AC Green, that unlocks like minus 10
only
coolness.
-1, yeah.
And there's nothing against him as a person. It was all, you know, it was marketing, and it was all one guy's personal decisions turning into a culture war battlefield, you know?
Yeah, he didn't necessarily choose that. Now, one of the other guys that you had initially mentioned to me did seem to choose his place in the Christianity before, and I alluded to him a little bit earlier here in the episode, so that might be the next best one to talk about.
Colorado Buffaloes head coach Bill McCartney, founder of Promise Keepers, is a top 10 all-time most fascinating athlete to me. 1970s, he was converted from like kind of like Catholicism to like charismatic Catholicism, a truly harrowing pair of words. You know, as part of the Jesus movement, like the young people hippie evangelical thing that like swept up even like Bob Dylan in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Promise Keepers goes back to all that. In the 80s, he gets a job at Colorado, and it is eerie to look back at that and map the stuff that like Dion and Dabo say now about their football programs, because like they didn't invent a damn thing. It's just
You
copy
said
and
the playbook?
paste.
Really?
Oh my gosh, it is copy and paste. He was out here baptizing kids on the field, and the ACLU was complaining about it, and he was turning that into a regional celebrity among right-wing Christians. He was it was all of it. You know, God brought me here to the University of Colorado. It said the exact same stuff Dion did about the exact same job. And he used that like ACLU thing, like the ACLU doesn't like me, the liberals don't like me. He spun that into like, you know, relationships with Focus on the Family, James Dobson. They were based in Colorado Springs, about an hour or so away. And just like boom, boom, boom. Even before they won a share of the national title in 1990, he was on his way to becoming a football religious celebrity. They win a title. They win I'm from Atlanta, so they split that title with Georgia Tech. So I will say they laid a claim to part of that title via very dubious shenanigans. But like the fifth down, Colorado, Missouri, when Colorado gets a fifth down, they wouldn't have won that national title without a fifth down. And Bill McCartney catapulting from like guy right-wingers like to like the main right-wing Christian, that didn't happen without a national title. So the refs in Missouri, forgetting how many downs there were, changed the course of religion in the 1990s.
That's a terrifying thought.
Yeah, counting is important.
You can't get a fifth down anymore because of woke.
Because of woke. It's but he made his name by like talking about abortion and homophobia, and over time he sort of sanded that stuff down and got really vague about it, and at times borderline woke about it. What makes him fascinating is the way he talked about racism. He said, like, at points in his career, he talked about like reparations, like as a good thing, as a thing that should happen. As, you know, he talked about like white Christians have are to blame for black people who don't trust Christians. He said a lot of stuff about racism that, like, if a football coach said today, that football coach would, like, be canceled for it. So, like, it is kind of a, you know, like, we make the because of woke joke, right? But it's
But you
kind of
couldn't
real.
be Bill McCartney anymore, I guess.
You
because of
couldn't be
woke.
Bill McCartney anymore. You couldn't say the very, very valid things that this right-wing white Christian man said in the 1990s. You couldn't say them anymore. Like, imagine Dabo coming out and saying, like, yeah, well, Christians didn't like Martin Luther King at the time, and that was wrong of them. You know, like, white Christians didn't like Martin Luther King. Like, imagine Dabo coming out and saying that. Like, it was like Harbaugh a few years ago said he like disagreed with Trump about something, and it was a whole thing. You know,
I feel like you've probably lost the plot a little bit as a movement if, like, the founder of the Promise Keepers is effectively too woke for you.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and that was going on, like, during their ascent. It was like I've researched a lot about Bill McCartney for reasons that might become known at some point, but. Yeah, he faced it from conservative evangelicals, conservative Catholics, because, you know, he would welcome in, like, Jewish people, and he would say, like, they don't have to convert. And yes, he would also say, like, creepy rapture stuff about Israel. But the stuff that he got yelled at for was saying, like, yeah, there are Jewish people, there are brothers and sisters. They, you know, Jesus was Jewish. Like, he said this stuff that it offended people. It feels inexplicable and bizarre to say it offended people, but it did. And, like, you know, it's not like I'm not, like, a fan of his, but he's fascinating because the way he talked about racism and the way he talked about like ecumenism and, like, his, like, theology was very vague and pliable. Like, as long as you were like, yeah, Jesus is cool and we'll hang out with you, then he's fine with you. It was never about, like, he did not have a list of things you're supposed to believe. You're supposed to be vaguely sexist, yes. You're supposed to be, like, really quietly homophobic, yes. But it's a fascinating guy. And all of this out of a freaking football coach. And, like, at the very end of their movement, like, around, it really started to peter out after around the late 90s. Then 9/11 hits, and nobody wants mushy, huggy Christianity anymore. They want Toby Keith Christianity, and that was the end of the Promise Keepers.
Fire and brimstone, but fire and brimstone that we specifically are dispensing.
Yes, yeah.
Word. I mean, that's Bill McCartney. We have one final one that you had put forward initially, and this is the guy that I was most familiar with going into this because of a particular record that he has. So I'm really interested to see what your perspective and what about him was kind of being pushed to you guys specifically.
So 80s, 90s Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher Orel Hershiser was there was a point when I, as an Atlantan, it was like the rise of the Braves as a thing, and I kind of resented it because it was like this gigantic bandwagon type thing when the Braves finally got good in the early 90s after decades of being nothing. And it, you know, it annoyed me as a child to, like, walk around and see everyone suddenly loving the Braves. Something in me was like, no, this is fake, right? You know,
is this the energy that propelled Isaac, the character living in Western PA, to be a Raiders fan?
I think so. I do think
I like it. I like seeing this peek behind the curtain.
It's like some kids are like that. Like Bill Connolly, my friend and colleague Bill Connolly is like he's like a Dolphins fan from Missouri, right?
Yeah. When I got into hockey, everyone was like, "Oh, you live in Baltimore. Clearly, you're going to root for the Capitals because DC and Baltimore are the same thing." I fucking hate the Capitals now for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, kids make weird choices about fandom. So I remember it was like, oh yeah, well, I'm a Dodgers fan. I'm the only Dodgers fan in that I've ever, you know, met. And one of their best players was this pitcher, Hershiser, who, as soon as I say this, then the adults around me are like, oh, here's this book you wrote about Jesus. This is your favorite player now. Look, he's kind of a dork, kind of like you. He kind of looks like a helpless little dweeb, but he's a really good athlete. And it was this funny thing. Tommy Lasorda nicknamed him Bulldog, ironically, because dude does not look like a bulldog. He looks like Howdy Doody, right?
It's the opposite of naming a big guy tiny.
Yes, yeah, it was completely that, where it's like the nickname is a bit, but it was this genuinely cool thing where, like, I remember I read his biography a couple times, wrote a book report on it, and I would, like, whenever the Braves are playing the Dodgers, so we get to see the game on TBS, I would definitely watch, especially if he was pitching, and it was like he had a tenacity to him. Like, he really did start to, like, live up to this nickname that was given to him as a goof And I don't know, like it was genuinely this thing where I was taught to like this athlete because he was a Christian, and this kind of happened. It happened a number of times. When you're a kid, you have like a million favorite athletes. But this was one example of me saying like, oh, okay, all right, like this guy, he's not cool, but he's cool.
He's cooler than AC Green.
Yeah.
You can get away with an Orel Hershiser Dodgers jersey and not be too lame.
Yeah, I think so, especially because it sounds like you're making a sex joke, right? So, like, somebody sees your Hershiser jersey, and they're like, "Oh, I know what word goes before that." But yeah, that was the Bulldog. that was my guy for a year or two there.
I like also, just as I quickly scroll through his Wikipedia, how much apparently like people really played up his religiosity and quotes about him. We've got the Sermon on the Mount when he's getting yelled at by Tommy Lasorda. We've got people referring to all his comebacks from injuries, his miracles. I appreciate that the media as a whole seems to have leaned into Orel Hershiser's overall vibe as a member of that community.
I love the poker story because the fact that his thing apparently seems to be Christianity, baseball, and poker is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Like the amount of time that you spend in Vegas as, I swear to God, I'm a Christian. I swear. There has to be a lot of people like that, but only one was a professional baseball player for the Dodgers who actually was the Bulldog. And I like that that's like the three facets of his personality.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are I guess baseball is a pretty good choice, but poker's pretty risky. Religion's pretty risky. Baseball's pretty low stakes usually. So yeah, that's a high flying choice there.
Well, those are three guys for us to consider. Do you have any final ones coming to mind that you think we need to look at along with these three before the Guy-Bunal starts to deliberate?
Oh man, there's also Dion. Like speaking of Dion, his religion thing began 30 years ago. I think it was after like a car wreck or something like that. And he had his biography in like 1995. It was called like Money, Power, and Sex with a foreword by Bishop T.D. Jakes. Yeah. So Dion's religion thing, it's not a new bit. It has been a part of his brand almost as long as the gold chains have.
He's definitely a formidable Christian figure. I think Dion is definitely bordering the too good to guy category. I think someone that has the capability to play at an all-star level in multiple sports and then goes on to be, by far the biggest ratings grab as a college football coach, probably a little too good to guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other considerations?
Oh man, I could probably go on forever.
Yeah.
Is Mark Price too good? Because that was another. The NBA's best free throw shooter was another guy I was taught. Like now, there's a role model.
I don't think he's too good, mostly because in this category, I feel like someone specializing in the fundamental asset of the free throw, like the taking advantage of. First off, all of the various charity lines that are referred to it, but like. Taking advantage of the free opportunities given to you that feels like a very good moralizing tale for young Christian sports fans.
Yeah. How about the pro wrestler Sting?
Is that not too satanic? Was it like, were you guys also getting like, this is, so like, I like enjoy pro wrestling, but I was not into it enough, partially because like everyone in church kind of like looked down and I never got super into it. And I didn't know if that was something that like, other Christian communities were more kind of open about, particularly yours.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it was a thing where it was just something that all the young people were into, and maybe it just flew under the radar for the adults. Like they heard about witchcraft and whatever, and they didn't pay much attention to wrestling. As long as you weren't dumb about it, as long as when it's like, oh, you're watching it and someone is bleeding from the forehead or someone's whole butt is out, or as long as you're smart about when you change a channel, you can get away with it. But I remember there were a few who there were a few wrestlers who older folks were fine with, and it was basically like, if you're gonna watch wrestling, you should know about Sting because that guy is a born again Christian, and like he has been for his entire career, and everyone who's ever known him has said he's a genuinely really nice dude. But that was another one who is another athlete that we were pushed toward because of religion. And it's Sting. Sting, one of the greatest wrestlers ever. So that they can't all be embarrassing. Some of them turn out fine.
they wouldn't be able to keep your attention if everyone sucked.
Yeah.
Sting, though, again, I think we're maybe too good to go. I think the three primary ones we have here between Hershiser, Green, and Bill McCartney, I think that's a good slate to select between. Xavier, do you have any like initial leanings between this trio?
So I've been like hooked on the AC Green Wikipedia page since we started talking about him, because this is one of the funniest personal life sections I've ever seen. We have, during his rookie year, his teammates sent a woman to tempt him to compromise his commitment.
Yes.
I love the biblical corollaries there, where it's like it's the temptations of AC Green. I just imagine a different Laker sending him a different woman for 40 days, trying to tempt him in the desert. He's like, no, I'm staying strong, and in fact, because I want to stay strong, I'm going to create my own abstinence youth camp so that I'm not by myself on this.
Buddy, you want to know what goes on at abstinence youth camp?
That's
Not abstinence. Man, that is the most fraught thing I've ever heard of.
It's one of the most
If a young person I'm
paradoxical
responsible
things.
for says they want to go to abstinence youth camp, I'm like, no, you're not going there. You're going to get in trouble at abstinence youth camp.
Can get pregnant in abstinence youth camp.
Yeah, good lord. My gosh. Like that's every joke about band camp taken to a million.
I see an LA Times headline from May 20th, 2000 by Bill Plaschke. Sex-free AC just grins, bears it.
Damn. Old Bill's got it, doesn't he? That's a bar right there. The
Green's
thing
got
about
some
like
shots.
teammates tempting him and stuff, and the trials and stuff, that probably happened as like a goof, as a prank at some point. Like, sure, I could imagine that being real, but it is also definitely a major thing within like religion world to
It's been
embellish
mythologized for real.
times when
Yeah.
someone tried to tempt you or whatever. Like it's a known thing. I can buy it.
I do love, speaking of like streaks of his, that he's got this. So he has an Iron Man streak. He's played 1,192 consecutive games. And that does kind of feel like, I'm not going to ascribe that to any higher power. But if I were someone that was trying to promote this guy's attachment to a higher power, to Christian teachings, that would definitely be an argument that I would make. Like, hey, a lot of people get hurt in the NBA. Not AC Green over here living the good life.
Yeah. You have made a connection that I also heard numerous times.
No, I'm not too surprised by that. I am surprised by some of the stuff that you had to tell us about Bill McCartney, and it does. Orel Hershiser is excellent. I think as we look at this, it comes down to AC Green or Bill McCartney for me, and I do like that Bill McCartney is a complex person and that he does have this weird kind of open. While it is unfortunate that his views would be seen as progressive in some circles now, because the gentleman certainly is not largely a progressive person, I do love having that weird context into today's world, seeing someone who made something with like Promise Keepers that I think you can still like see effects of, see ripples of, but it is now kind of, like we said, so far from the plot that they are on now. He probably would not get along well with woke. That being said, he does still say a lot of bad things. So
Yes.
Again, I think that while it's great that he's out here being largely against racism, I mean, so is Jim Jones. So we can't necessarily support everyone that is making like good racial progress in their church if they're doing other bad things.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Beanie Baby that AC Green put on his head on the bench and would just sit on the bench during games with a Beanie Baby on his head?
I forgot about that one.
He is a bit of a dork. That is a really unfortunate jersey for the few kids that got that.
It's a green Beanie Baby called Little AC, which stands for Abstinence Committed. On the back, it says, "I've got the power." And he just kept that on his head while sitting on the bench. And that is possibly the funniest thing. This quote, I had a teammate come up to me and say, "You don't know how silly you look with that bear on your head." I told him, "You don't know how silly you look when you're running around at night half drunk."
That is also a bar. AC Green also had some bars. I don't necessarily agree with it, but if he did come with that comeback immediately afterwards, that's at least pretty good thinking. I think in the context of the lens that we're trying to view these guys as kind of like very Christian coded and very Christian marketed athletes, being this dork that we have just now described AC Green being someone that is able to remain pure in so many different ways throughout not just like the standard run-of-the-mill NBA, but through two really wild eras of the Lakers, like the championship Lakers during just some particularly raunchy times in both cases. He feels the most, I think, like a story that people of that environment want to hold up. I think AC Green this week has got to be the inductee, Xavier, unless you feel differently.
I mean, have you been listening to me for the past 20 minutes? I'm 100% on the AC Green train.
And nobody else is.
I will buy an AC Green jersey for all of those 90s Christian kids to feel represented.
We appreciate this. Thank you.
I'm proud of you for being willing to put that social marker on you, Xavier. I am not, but I am willing to let you go ahead and do the honors, if you wouldn't mind, X, on our boy AC Green here.
Ooh, this is weird. I don't get to usually do this, but today it's our very special honor to welcome both the man and the little bear, Big AC and Little AC Green. Welcome to the Hall of Guy.
Wow, damn. Boom. That's it.
There we go. AC Green is amongst our hall. And Jason, it has been phenomenal to count you now amongst our guests, amongst the friends of the show. If I may just take one more moment again to reiterate to everybody, Hell is a World Without You is an absolutely delightful book. I read a good number of books. I normally don't go around yelling about them too much. I really deeply enjoyed this one. And if you think after hearing this, you might at all like it, I really recommend checking it out. Not a long read, really great. And hey, Jason, if people want to check out other things that you've written, that you say, anything like that, where they can hear your thoughts, is there anywhere in particular they can turn?
Most of my stuff is at jasonkirk.fyi on various networks. I co-host the Shutdown Fullcast, kind of about sports, and the Vacation Bible School podcast about religion. Yeah, those are the things.
Those are things. Those are the things for you, at least if people want to check any of our things. Everything's at bit.ly/remember that guy, all one word, all lowercase. Thank you again for being on, man. This was really phenomenal. More thanks to producer Craig and the coders behind him for recording all this, and to our musical director, Don Ham, for our lovely theme music. Any final remarks, Jason or Xavier, from you on the way out?
Thanks, y'all. This was fun, and I in this time I feel proud of AC Green. So thank you for
for the first time ever, someone feels proud of AC Green. In the meantime, I am proud to have been your host, James,
and I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
Minister of Sports, Jason Kirk. Thank you.
And I'm Diaz. Sorry I was so quiet during that conversation with our Minister of Sport, Jason Kirk, but I want to contribute a fun fact about our most recent inductee, AC Green. Did you know he maintained his virginity thanks to the virtues he learned from his favorite martial art, Taekwondo? I'm not going to turn on camera because I just got out of the shower. And not to give too much details, but I don't have clothes on.
I'm at home, so I just wanted to say hi.
Oh, fantastic. Maybe this is the outtake. Maybe this is, we throw a little curveball.